Welcome to Lights, Camera, Action, where we'll teach you all about the basics of photography. I'm Trinity Webster Bass, a senior broadcast journalism major, Afro-American Studies minor here at Howard University. And let's get on with the show. The ISO setting controls the amount of light that your camera lets in and has a huge impact on the lightness and darkness of your photos. The ISO is controlled by how much light is coming through the camera, so in brighter lighting, a lower ISO is best, but in less light, a higher ISO is best. Frames per second, or the frame rate, is the measurement of how quickly a number of frames appears within a second. Think stop motion animation. Usually, iPhones are set in the setting of 4K or 60 frames per second. White balance is the process of removing unrealistic color cast so that objects will appear white in person and rendered white. If using a DSLR camera, you would use these settings to adjust the white balance within your camera. About ISO, frames per second, and white balance, let's hear from my classmates Logan and Danilo.
What's up, everybody, and thank you so much, Trinity, and welcome back to another episode of Out of the Office. As you already know, we're talking about photography today, and we have just a couple terms that we want to go over to make sure that your next photo composition is great. Number one, focal length. Focal length is the distance between the optical center of a lens and the camera's image sensor. In layman's terms, how far are you from the camera? Fun fact, your eyes actually have a focal length as well, and they're usually measured in millimeters. Number two, bokeh. You've probably seen the bokeh technique before when the subject is very clear in the front and then the background is blurry. It's commonly used, but the word itself comes from the word bokeh, originating in Japan, meaning haze or blur. Number three, shutter speed. Shutter speed is the length of time a camera's shutter is open, exposing the camera sensor to light. The faster the shutter speed, the clearer the image. Great for catching things in motion. Number four, aspect ratio. You've probably seen this on your Instagram or Twitter when you were about to upload something. But aspect ratio is simply the image's width to its height. Thank you guys, and that's all the time that I have for you. Next up, Logan.
Hello everybody, my name is Logan Christopher Bernard Johns. I'm a junior journalism major, photography minor from Washington, D.C. by way of Kingston, Jamaica. And we're here to talk about photography. In Latin, aperture essentially means to open. In photographic terms, it is the same thing. It is essentially the opening of a lens which light passes through. Inside of a camera lens are aperture blades, in which comprises the lens diaphragm. And finally, my friends, we have, in photography terms, an f-stop. So you guys might be asking yourself, what in the world does f-stop mean? I have an answer for you. F-stop is essentially, in very simple terms, the number that your camera shows you when you change the size of the lens aperture. In other terms, aperture measurements on your camera. So let's say if I wanted to change the aperture setting on my camera, let's actually use an example. When you're in a dark room using film photography, you would use this film camera. And if you wanted to change the aperture, you would use the aperture in the dark room to change that lighting and to change that setting. On digital cameras, you'd be able to change that aperture setting digitally through that setting. So essentially, aperture is kind of coming to terms with the lighting and coming to terms with the settings. I'll pass it off to Trinity.
Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.